Hello again and welcome back to our course on Project 2019 Advanced. In the preceding section we started looking at targeted reporting and I took you through some of the features of a few of the main reports that are available in the dashboards category in reports in Project 2019. So having already looked at the project overview in some detail earlier in the course, we looked at cost overview and we looked at burn down. Now, two other dashboard reports that are of interest are the upcoming tasks report, which is probably the simplest one of the ones that we're going to look at. And I'm not going to dwell too long on it, but let's just jump into upcoming tasks. And if you read the headings above the table and the chart there, we have status of remaining tasks that are due this week and status of tasks starting in the next week. You can see basically once you've selected the correct data, this report uses a pretty straightforward table there on a chart. And it's a good way of looking at what you're about to start or continue with in the coming week. Another report, however, which you might think would be pretty much the same as the cost overview, is the work overview. And in many ways, although it fulfills the same function in giving a snapshot of how things have gone so far and also some aspects of how things are likely to continue in the future, there are a couple of specific features here that I'd like to look at. Now, this is a work burn down report. I explained burn down reports in the preceding section. And note that if I select that chart at the top there, I can see that this is actually not a combination chart. So if I click on chart type, we can see that what we've got is actually a line chart. But the line chart has three separate series: remaining cumulative work, remaining cumulative actual work, and baseline remaining cumulative work. We then move down to work stats, which is similar to a chart that we saw earlier. Now, if we check the chart type, we can see that we do have a combination chart there, showing actual work, remaining work, and baseline work. And that's a combination of a stacked column chart and a line with markers. Now, if we scroll down below that, let's check the chart type again. So here we have a bar chart. And this works on pretty much the same principle as a column chart, but the bars are horizontal. So sometimes I believe it's advantageous to use bar charts rather than column charts because column charts have a tendency to imply progression over time. Now, I know that that's not the case. And if you look at the one immediately above, the categories are definitely not time related. But sometimes it's clearer that you're not dealing with something veering over time if you use a bar chart rather than a column chart. Now, over on the right there, we have remaining availability. Now, remaining availability only involves one field, the remaining of availability field. And you look at that and you look at the filter. The filter is resources work, and you may think, why are there only 3 lines there? Because there's nothing there saying, for example, that I'm only looking at external resources. So why can I only see 3 resources in the legend? And the reason is quite straightforward, and that is that the legend doesn't fit in the space that's available. And in fact, one of the problems you will sometimes get when Project 2019 creates a report for you, particularly one of the reports of a standard type like this, is that, for example, if you have a lot of resources and you do include a legend, the legend may be bigger than the chart itself. And this one does actually have all the resources in it, but you can't actually see them all because there just isn't enough room to show them all. If I was to drag this down a bit, you would see that there are actually more resources hiding underneath there. So just be aware of that as well. And you can also see that if I click the filter in this chart, you can see that we have 9 data series in there, 9 different lines, and each of them corresponding to one of the resources. And all of those names are in the legend. As I said, you just can't see them all. So that's another point to be wary of. If I were producing a chart like this, I would make sure that there was plenty of room for the legend to be big enough to show all of those values. So having looked at the dashboards, let's move on now to the next category, and these are reports related to resources. So we have a report here which is overallocated resources. Now, unfortunately, on this project, we don't have any overallocated resources. If we did, then we have two charts here. We have a work status chart for overallocated resources and an overallocation chart, so surplus work assigned to overallocated resources. So this report can really help you identify the work that needs to be reallocated to different resources. And even though these charts are empty for this project, if you click on each chart, you can still look at the filter that's applied, the grouping and the outline levels. You can also look at the fields that are selected and so on, so you can still work out how that particular report is put together. Now let's go to a different one. Let's go back to Reports, click Resources, and we're going to select Resource Overview. Now I don't think there are any particular surprises on this one. You've got a straightforward combination chart just here. Note that in this particular combination chart, the blue series is actual work, the orange series is remaining work, and the clustered column plots those two together. The baseline work is plotted as a grey line. So moving on from resources, let's now look at costs. And the first cost report I want to look at that we haven't looked at so far is cash flow. Now cash flow again doesn't really have any particular surprises in it. If you click on the chart just here, one important point, the category for the chart here is time. And on this occasion, the way that time is sliced up is in quarters. So if I click on my quarters, go to the field list, and next to select category where it says time, if I click on the edit button, you can see the units of time are quarters. We have the date format, and we're numbering our quarters 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. We have the count, which is 1, and the chart is plotted 1 quarter at a time. It starts on April the 1st, 2019, and it ends on November the 19th, 2019. So it very neatly fits into this calendar year. So if I wanted to change the date format, for instance, I might put something like this in and click on OK. And you can see that now displays that date slightly differently. So this would be particularly useful if you have a project that spans a number of years. Now the next report in the costs drop down is costs overrun. Now again, there are no particular surprises here other than to illustrate a little bit of a problem you can get with some styles of report. Now when you're dealing with overruns, the problem usually arises if you have some underruns. Now let me explain what I mean by that. If you look at the task cost variance, the chart on the left, if everything had gone over, so if every task had cost more than you'd expected, every point plotted on the chart would be above $0. But because one task, that is testing, which itself is a summary task of course, is under cost baseline, so it's almost $4,000 under the baseline, we get a negative plotted point. And that sort of upsets the whole thing really, because you finish up with the labels on the horizontal axis there diagonal as they are reading across. So it all looks a little bit messy really. And that's actually quite difficult to overcome. Even using the column approach on the right for resource cost variance, you get something of the same problem. So trying to plot the axis there on a zero line. And so this is quite a difficult one where you've got a mixture of positive and negative variance in either or both of task cost or resource cost. So continuing to look at those cost reports, let's click again, and earned value report is the next one. Now I'm going to skip that now because I'm going to cover earned value reporting later in the course. So let's go back to reports, costs, and let's select resource cost overview. And again, hopefully no surprises there because of course we've looked at it before. However, if we go into task cost overview, we see a new little feature here, and the task cost overview feature is a pie chart. And I'm sure you're all very familiar with using pie charts. The key thing to remember with pie charts is that they only really make sense when you're dealing with something that adds up to a whole. So where in this case the 4 categories within that chart actually together add up to the total of something. Now, in fact, in this case, this is the division of the tasks within this project according to their status. And the status will be starting at the top there and going clockwise. So a task is either complete, it's on schedule, it's running late, it's in the future, or it's not started yet. And what this pie chart is a division of the cost value of those tasks in those 4 categories. Now there is a task field status, and if I click within the chart as I've done, and if you look over here, what you're effectively doing is we're filtering on active tasks, that as opposed to inactive tasks. And we're grouping them by status with an outline level of 1. So basically, if you were to look at the Gantt chart for the project, show status and maybe even group everything by status, you would see that tasks fall into one of those 4 categories and the corresponding cost totals are shown in the pie chart. Now, of course, the pie chart is very different from most of the other types of charts we've seen, and in that, for example, it doesn't have axes. And there are still many things that you can do. For example, let's suppose that I decided I don't need the legend. So I could come into here and I could switch off the legend. And that makes my pie chart a little bit bigger. It gives it a little bit more room to breathe. And it's fine to turn off that legend because I don't really need it in this case. And again, if I right click and select Format Data Series, I can do things like adjust the angle of the first slice. So you can see as I move that, it moves them round. And I could also do a pie explosion, which is sometimes a nice effective way of displaying your pie chart. Now, the final category of reports that I want to look at are the in-progress reports. And generally speaking, these point out problems, or in the case of the first one, just the critical tasks, which are the tasks which currently are the critical ones. So let's go into there. So some stakeholders may just want to review the status of these critical tasks and find out how we're doing with them and what measures we've taken to deal with any dangers to their costs or deadlines. So that's a pretty straightforward table, and as you'd expect, if I click within the table, and I'm just going to close down that format shape and expand my field list a little bit. And again, if we look at the filter, we can see that we're currently filtering for critical tasks. Now, the next one to look at, if we go back to in progress, is late tasks. So these are tasks that are running late, and fortunately, we don't have any on this project, which is great. Let's go back to reports, milestone reports. Now what we've got here's a few different items. So these are 6 different items just here. And the top 3 in effect are headings. So they're essentially text boxes. And the 3 below them are tables. And you'll see as I click on the first one here, I know it's a table because I've got my Table Tools contextual ribbon showing at the top. And then we have a chart over there on the right. And finally, let's jump back to reports. In progress, we have slipping tasks. So these are any tasks where their current scheduled finish date is past their baseline finish date. And again, these are ones that we might want to focus on to see if there's something we can do to avoid them slipping or to reduce the slippage. So there we are. We've spent a lot of time looking at reports on this course, and you've still got a nice chunky exercise to do. So apart from the reason that I explained for going through all of the standard reports and the targeting aspects and what they're used for, the other important thing to bear in mind with all of these reports is that they usually contain good ideas on how to do things. So if you want to find out how to achieve a particular effect in a chart or a table or even in a heading, you can find the nearest you can in one of the standard reports, and you should know enough now to be able to sort of take it to pieces and have a look to see how it works. So that's it on the standard reports and creating and customizing reports for now, other than exercise 06, which we're going to cover in the next section. So I'll see you then.